met this bad man. He squeezed me until I threw up the Quran. When I ran to Khadija in anguish and fears, she explained, "This is Jibreel," and wiped off my tears. I'm Muhammad, I'm a prophet because I am him, and Allah caters to my needs.
Sorry, I do not have that before I come and speak. Please don't ever do that before I come and speak.
Okay, that's fine.
So much backlash
It's okay.
from my supporters. All right,
it's okay. That's fine.
It's for you. It's not for me. This is one thing I will not mock Mohammed like that.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. How are you doing, Jay? We are live.
I wish you would put up the song that we always put up before we start. The nice, beautiful hymn that you always put up. But that's okay. Are we now live? Are we live?
Yeah, we are live. Yeah. I play different songs, depend like what it is comes first, so it's absolutely fine. How are you doing?
Never ever do that with me. Always play the songs about Jesus Christ, the ones you usually do. I love those. Those are beautiful.
Sure, I don't mind. If that's not you, if you don't like my songs, that's fine. Okay, so how are you doing?
Good, pretty good. I just got back from San Jose, and I'm getting ready to head off again to about 2 different continents and about 5 different countries.
Okay, good. So I think it was middle of July or sometime we met, and then we were talking about Yasir Qadhi, and then what he stated about Hadith, and how Hadith is doesn't meet with the historical criteria, let's say. That's in summary, that's what he said. We did live stream on it, and then other day I was talking with you. You expressed that actually he put up another video where he's unpacking himself. So we decided to come together and then discuss what he really meant to say back in July, right?
Yeah, it was July 9th that he was interviewed, and it was Skepsis Islamica by a lady named Roxana Irani and Tehran Pool. And at that point, he made some statements that caused huge amount of, I think, anger in the Muslim community, especially in his own community where he is in Dallas. I don't know if you've heard of Epic Center, East Plato.
I've been to his mosque before.
He is the theologian for that center, and so he has a school there that he teaches. And so in one of his classes on the 31st of July, so we're talking about just a little over a month ago, he was asked this question by his students: why did you say what you said back on July 9th to Skepsis Islamica? And if you want me, I can go through what he said and what was causing the problem.
I've got the video, actually. I can play it.
Well, that would take too long. Basically, there's 3 comments that he made that's causing the problem. Do you want me to just say what they are, and then he'll then repeat them in the video we're going to watch, or should we just let him repeat them?
It's up to you. I prefer kind of him to explain himself and then we comment on it. But if that's not something you are comfortable about it,
no, that's fine. We've already done this. This is the one that you and I put together. We looked at those comments, and that took about an hour or 2 hours to do that. But now what we're doing is we're now 2-3 weeks later, and his students are upset with him because of what he admitted back on July 9th. And so that's where we're going to pick it up, how he responds to his students. So this is really a private meeting. It's not something that should be splashed all over the internet, I think is what they're thinking, but it's on the internet. And you can go to Lighthouse on the internet. It's called Lighthouse. And that is the repository for his teachings that he does with his students there in Northeast Dallas here in the United States. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to look and see how he define these 2 epistemologies. In July 9th, he says there are 2 epistemologies that do not at all come together. And one is over here on this is the Hadith sciences over here. And then on this side is the academy, which is Western, he calls historical critical method, which is what we would call it as well. The academic historical critical method on this side. And the 2 cannot come together. And then he made this comment, and I'll just quote him. He said, "You're well aware that the one on the academy that the one in the academy affirms the Muslim Sunni sciences of Hadith, nobody, it is considered to be completely discredited. So the people over here on the academy are looking at the Hadith sciences and they're saying it is completely discredited. Now, his students are going to come back and say, well, how did you say that? So that's what we're going to get into now.
Just a second, Jay. Okay, so he's been questioned as he was promoting his book. He's been questioned about historical critics regarding the Hadith, and then the video which you sent it to me is a month ago now, 7/29 July.
I've got it down as 31 July.
Okay. It says it's a question answer session. So he usually does these things like recorded. I wasn't familiar with this channel, but you can get to see like he does lots of sessions on Epic and his YouTube channel stuff. So in that, it is approximately 32 minutes video. That's what we are going to review and then see actually what he wanted to say. Sometimes it happens to us. Sometimes when we are on the spot, we don't kind of explain the things we wanted. So it looks like Yasir Qadhi's students maybe taught the same thing, and then they give him opportunity to unpack what he meant, whether Hadith is historically reliable or not.
No.
And so thank you very much, everyone who is joining us in the chat. So as we kind of go through Yasir Qadhi's video, those of you who wants to kind of bring things to our attention or ask questions on the topic, please tag DCCI Ministries, and then we take it from there. Are we ready? So let me share the screen. One of the things we will do is, Jay, I'll play the video from the beginning, and then when you want to kind of pause, just let me know. We pause that, and then you kind of unpack, or if I've got questions, we just discuss that. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. This is gonna coming from YouTube.
So we're having Q&A today. So first question, subhanAllah. Difficult one, but it needs to be done. When you said that Hadith does not meet the Western standards of academia, what does that mean? Is Hadith applicable for us as Muslims? So obviously, brothers and sisters, this goes without saying that there is no Islam without the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is understood. Allah didn't just reveal a book, He sent us a messenger to explain the book. And we base our religion. There is no religion without the two sources of the Quran and the Sunnah. And we base our religion on the Sunnah, and the Sunnah is preserved through the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And the science of Hadith is a separate category, and it is a science that Muslims should legitimately take pride in. And I think this is an obvious reality for all of us as Muslims. And as somebody who's been preaching and teaching for quite literally over 30 years, I don't think you would be hard-pressed to find a single dars or khutbah or fatwa that I've ever given in which I don't quote Quran and Hadith. And of course, our scholars have developed a rigorous method of verifying Hadith. But the question once again comes, before I answer, let's take a step back here. And this isn't just about this one question. You are my students here, you come to my masjid here. I want to teach you to think broader, to think a little bit more critically. So this isn't just about the one issue here. There's lots of problems taking place on social media. And one of the problems that social media has exacerbated, it's always been there, is to misunderstand a snippet or a quotation. The problem of being misquoted always happens. It's just the reality. But one of the principles that our religion teaches us, in fact, it is a part of usul al-fiqh. One of the principles our religion teaches us is that al-kalamu ala muradi qa'ilihi. Speech is to be understood in light of what the speaker intended. Now, this isn't just for me. This isn't just for this issue. I want you to start, as you move on in life, this isn't the only time something's going to happen with you or with other people. I want you to start thinking a bit more nuanced. Look at the speaker, look at the audience, look at the context, look at the overall track record. Lots of things need to be looked at. Let me give you an example every one of you at Epic is familiar with.
Okay,
Our masjid.
I'm gonna pause here because I can't play very long time without, otherwise I will get copyright strike stuff. So far, have you got anything you wanna express, Jay? So he's expressing that as a Muslim you cannot get rid of the Hadith. So Islamic faith is based on the Quran and on the Hadith, and he's taking opportunity to answer the questions come from his people from his mosque regarding what he really meant when he was talking about is the Hadith historically not reliable.
Yeah. And so all he's doing is he's laying out a foundation of where he's going to go next.
Yeah. I've been to his mosque a few years back when I was in Texas. I would say like I've been to quite a lot of mosques, and one of the I would say like people in his mosque are very much aware of teachings of Islam. So it's not like lay Muslims. Yeah, lay Muslims, but not like very kind of the ones who don't even know what Islam teaches. So I had some good conversations over there. So it's good that people are keeping him accountable for what he's saying.
Yeah, and to be fair, he has done a good job of really keeping and getting his whole clientele up to snuff. And these teachings are absolutely essential because of the questions. Living in an American environment, they're in Texas, they're in Dallas, they're getting bombarded with definitions of what you mean, how do we stand, how do we take what we know or what we are, and how do we apply that in a American environment. And this is much of what these little teaching seminars are, and this is one of them. And so it's great to be able to listen in on what he's saying on this subject specifically, because this subject also impacts on our biblical text on who our Lord and Savior is, Jesus Christ. All right, so this is a good introduction to just get you into the foundations of where he's going to go next.
Okay.
Targeted by the far right, by a Zionist organization for the last 8 months. You know this. How do they target us? How do they target us? They take snippets, not just from me, from all of our speakers. Those snippets, those phrases, because you're in this ambiance of a masjid, you fully understand them. But when you take those snippets and put them to a non-Muslim audience, and you paint them with a different painting, it is very easy to make a sinister connotation. They do this with me all the time. I say, for example, that, I don't know, Allah will protect his religion. Okay, he will. And this clip is going to go out and say, oh, look, he is threatening anybody who doesn't, follow Islam. I say that the Prophet predicted Islam is going to spread east and west. Oh, this is triumphalism. He wants to knock out America and this and that. Like, you can say the most innocuous, innocent things, but because I'm speaking with some Arabic phrases, I say Allah, I say the Prophet, I use the word Sharia. They love whenever they say the Sharia. They say, oh, he wants to apply the Sharia over here. So when they do that, all of you feel a legitimate sense of frustration and anger. Come on, just do a bit of homework, do a bit of research, understand this is a speaker who has a track record. Now, realize that the same also happens from within our community. The exact same thing. Taking an aspect, taking a quotation, not looking at the context, and then quite literally reading in much more than what possibly could be intended.
Let me stop here.
Okay, just beware, I don't see you when I'm playing the clip. It's on the different screen.
Okay, you want me to just interrupt then? Okay, well, this is what he is saying is something that I'm going through right now in the last week and a half with all the videos that are going up attacking me and people who have taken things I've said in the past or things that are saying now, and then they expose it or they elevate it, but they also probably misquote what I've said later on, or they don't look at the whole argument. And I think what he's saying here is typical. This is normal. If you're in the public sphere like he is, and he's very public, and people could take just a 6-second or a 20-second sound bite and then impose their own agenda on that, then of course it can make you look like you're either an idiot or stupid, or you're actually lying, or you're actually being dishonest. And we're going to find as he goes through this that this is a particular problem he's going to start posing in on the Christian community, us missionaries. And so understanding, we need to be careful, and I'm glad you're doing this, that you're actually letting him speak, and we're going through and letting him actually give his argument so that we can hear what his argument is, and then be able to, and the whole argument, the entire 32 minutes of it, and then we can then respond to it. But we need to make sure that we are quoting him and that we're not imposing our agenda or imposing our philosophy or imposing our epistemology onto what he's saying.
When you sent this to me, you said he's unpacking himself, explaining himself what he meant on 7th of July.
Yeah, 9th of July. So he said,
yeah,
since the 9th of July, there has been a huge amount of acrimony against him,
yeah,
both outside of Islam and within Islam. And that's true. And it makes sense because I find Yasir Qadhi is the most honest of all of our the people who are advocating Islam in our country here, because he is actually trying to make it sense for the Western world. And the reason why is because he has feet in both camps, and he made that very clear in July 9th, that he went to Medina and got the best degree you can get on the Hadith sciences over here, and then he went to Yale University afterwards and got a PhD in historical criticism. So he understands both. Therefore, he is probably the best spokesman in America, and I would say even better than Shabir Ali on this, to actually help the Western world, help Americans, especially help Muslims living in America, how to explain these two different epistemologies. And I thought he did a great job on July 9th. It's because he did such a good job that we grabbed that and said, are the rest of the world listening to this? Listen to what the Muslims are saying. Look and see what they have for the Hadith sciences. We were on this side, and now we're starting to understand what they're saying. But he didn't explain this side. This video now and this talk, he's going to now explain what's going on over here. And that's why I've asked if we could go ahead and unpack it for the world to see.
I think his PhD was in Ibn Taymiyyah, and that's like the book he was advertising when he made a comment on Hadith. He was kind of using his work and his studies with Ibn Taymiyyah and have like Salafism messed up stuff. By the way, like this short clip, 4 minutes we watched, in that he's talking also about there was like news circulating how he wanted to set up like kind of Sharia city around his mosque area, or like buying new property and then setting up like this Muslim community, kind of setting up this Muslim only area, Sharia, with the Sharia laws are fully worked. I don't know full details. I just kind of remember vaguely couple of news about it. So it was stopped by so I think that's what he's talking about, how people apparently misinterpreted his sayings when they were trying to set up this Sharia city in Texas.
It's not about just my particular snippets. It's just the reality of what it is. Now, somebody like myself, I have the dubious distinction of having to deal with not only the external critics, the far right, but also Allah has blessed me and tested me with a large group of people who admire me and people who don't admire me, right? It's impossible for me to say something that passes the standards of every one of these demographics every single time. And I am active in multiple fields simultaneously. I preach to the masses. I teach a little bit more advanced. I teach much more advanced at the graduate level. I present in the academy. I give public speeches in front of non-Muslims. I'm invited to churches. I'm invited to events of a political nature. I speak at rallies. Last year, I spoke at the largest, pro-Palestinian rally in the country ever organized. And I was one of only 2 clerics to speak there, right? And again, if you've never spoken in a political rally, if you've never given a lecture there, a political rally, next time you see an effective speaker, go look at Martin Luther King's speech, go look at any speech in a political rally. It's not an academic class. You need sound bites and snippets that motivate the crowd. You need to inspire them. You need to say things that are going to make them go forward. That is not the context of an academic class. So,
do you want me to kind of listen all this part? This says
no, that's fine. This is fine. Actually, I love this because he's speaking for me as well. I do the same thing, and many times I have been very passionate, and I say things to a huge crowd. that people say afterwards are being very triumphalistic. And Yasir Qadhi and I have many different venues that we speak in, and I think that's what he's trying to say. Be careful when I'm speaking in this venue. I'm more passionate. I may be much more hyperbolic. I might go for hyperbole in what I'm saying, whereas in an academic setting and with my students, I would never say that. And I just be careful of the context where I'm speaking. So he just putting that out as a warning.
So your audience is Meta. So he's talking about people who are supporting Hamas, supporting Palestine. So there will be people like who are Muslim, who are not Muslim. Lots of people will come. So in such a places, your motivation is your aim to motivate them stuff.
Right. And we need to be aware of that. And therefore, don't hammer him on when he's over here talking to a huge crowd where he's trying to get them rallied up, to get excited. And then say, so that's what you're really believing, and therefore you win. And so this is probably getting back to this idea that he wants to start a Sharia environment there at Epic City. He wants to create a Sharia environment. And of course, Governor Abbott was all over the news when that went out, when he made that statement. He says, we are not bringing in a different law. Texas has its own law, and we don't need an Islamic law. And really, Yasir Qadhi didn't mean to say that, but in the heat of the moment, it can be interpreted that way. And that's all he's cautioning about. Be careful. Be careful of who I was talking to, the environment I was in, and why I made that claim. He never intended that he's actually going to bring Islamic law in contradistinction to Texas law.
I didn't follow those things. I don't know fully, but
no, that's something that's been happening here in America, so you wouldn't know about this. But it's been all over the news in maybe the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I remember looking at the things where they were talking about the Epic City, all that. But I don't remember the full details. So
that's why he's giving that example. That's all he's saying. Okay.
On that day, we had 100,000, 200,000, I don't know how many thousand people, hundreds of thousands of people there, and smack in the middle were around 150 ultra-Orthodox Jewish rabbis from a sect called the Natura Cartae that are anti-Zionist. It was Saturday. They had walked to the rally because they cannot take the car or the bus because it's Saturday. They had walked in the sun, and they were all dressed with big, signs that, we are Jewish but pro-Palestinian, like very positive signs, right? And we have to make a point that we want the support of the people of all faiths, especially of a Jewish background, that are anti-Zionist. So on the cuff of this moment, off the spur, and I have no regrets because it's a political speech. When everybody's seeing it's dead silent, you see these people, they made their way to the front. They're literally wanting to make a point. I mean, you feel, their sense that they want to participate. And I said passionately that this is what, I forgot the wording, whatever it was. This is what Judah is. These are the real, these are the real followers of Moses. That's what I said, right? These are the real followers of Moses. These are the people we need to be appreciating and thank, right? And the crowd went wild, as they should. We need to make the point. We need allies. We need to make the point. We are not anti-Jewish, we're anti-Zionist. I have no regrets. And if I would have done that again, I would have done the same thing. Subhanallah, the entire internet went a buzz by, with utmost respect, people who have never given political speeches. People who only attend their bubble halaqat, durus, and they're like, oh my God, he's validating their theology. He's saying they're going to enter heaven. What are you serious? This is not an aqidah class. It's a political rally for Palestine, and the language used, the examples used, the rhetoric used was absolutely needed for that rally. But when you take that snippet and you feed it to a group of people that literally have nothing, well, not too harsh here, but they're not active outside. They're not active outside of their bubbles. They're literally keyboard warriors, right? An entire controversy created, and I get dragged into it, and it's actually, frankly, not even, it's a waste of everybody's time, but it is what it is. So I have to deal with, as I said, multiple groups of people that are loving to read in their snippets, and Allah musta'an. It is what it is. And I'm not asking for your sympathies. I'm very happy that Allah has blessed me to be active in multiple fields. But my point is, I am also active in the Western Academy. And I teach and I present papers. Well, I'm no longer a professor, but I do present papers, and I'm still involved, and I have an academic book. This is a peer-reviewed academic book. Had I been in the professorial field, that would have been my upgrade to full professor. I am full professor in my Islamic seminary. Had I not been, that book would have basically upgraded me to, that's an academic book. So I'm also active in that field. And
I'm gonna pause here for a second. I just noticed. So I was trying to download the video and then it was like giving me error in somehow it doesn't play on my computer. Just I could listen to it. I listened a little bit of it. I didn't listen whole of the video, but I'm just noticing, even though this is open QA, he's got like whole notes for the question. So he knew what the question is. You can see like he's just turning the pages to figure out, okay, what I'm gonna say next, like prepared answer to his question.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. And I that you should take note. Also, he is now. This is all a lead up to really the major question. He's not been talking about what the guy asked yet. And you might say, well, get to the point. Get to the point. We're now 8 minutes in,
Yeah,
and he still hasn't got. But he is actually. This is a good introduction, Hatun. It is a great introduction. I would, I commend him for doing this because he needs to be careful. He needs to be careful that people don't misquote him from here on out. Listen, I understand that. I've been misquoted. I understand the same thing he gets misquoted. So because this is a sensitive subject, he said that at the very beginning when he started this lecture or this talk question and answer. So this is a very difficult subject. He's taken 8 minutes to really introduce it as to why I'm now answering this question. Make sure that you really quote me correctly. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. Now we're going to start getting into the subject of this answer.
Well, also helpful to remember, he's dealing with the people from his mosque. So he's like, he teaches quite a lot there and he's accountable to them. So there is, it's good that he's handling that. Okay, so now Shaykh was also involved in West in academia. So we are listening that part. Let's pick up.
Field, I simply pointed out that according to the epistemology of the Western Academy, they have a different mechanism, and their mechanism, I understand, obviously I don't agree with it, I understand that for them, Hadith does not give definitive knowledge, because the Western Academy has its rules. And obviously, when I'm in the academy, I must abide by their rules. That's the way the world works. When I'm outside of it, which is most of my time, obviously I am a practicing Muslim. I observe obviously I'm practicing Muslim within the academy. I'm saying how I present, what I say. So I wanted to actually quickly give you a very brief introduction. What exactly is the historical critical method and why would we as Muslims disagree with it? Simplistically, the historical critical method, the HCM, is a series of tools that was employed by groups of thinkers in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century who were trying to figure out, listen to this, how do we read the Bible when we're not believers anymore in the Bible? This is unprecedented for the Western world. If you're a Christian, the Bible is the Word of God. There were no non-Christians studying the Bible for the sake of literature. This is beginning in the 16th, 17th, especially 18th century. So what are, especially in Germany, what are people who don't believe the Bible is from God? How will they begin to give it its due without bringing in religion? So they develop techniques and methods. We call these techniques the historical critical method. And there's multiple strands within it: textual criticism, redaction criticism, form criticism, multiple. And
okay, let's stop there.
Where did the Bible come from? Who authored the Bible? I mean, if you're a Christian, you're going to say,
stop. Right. Okay. So now he has put out his platform, and this is very important because on most people who heard what he just said, it'll go right over their heads. The historical critical method, he was saying, was created only for the Bible. No. That he's incorrect. The historical critical method has been there before the Bible. It was probably used more on the Bible than any other piece of literature. That's true. It is. But what I say is, it wasn't created for the Bible. Those criticisms did exist beforehand, but it got hugely matured on the Bible. Now, notice he gave 4. Let's go through each one of those 4, Hatun, so people know what we're talking about. He's not going to do it. So he just read them up. Boom, 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 boom. Let's start with the first one. Textual criticism he talked about. That's the technique of restoring the text as nearly as possible to their original form. That's what we do with textual criticism. If you have something that's written much later, you want to bring it back to what you think was the original text. That is what we call textual criticism. He talked about redacted criticism. Looking at, because something is written much later and the editor who writes it down, that copy that we have, or that manuscript that we have, the most extant manuscript we have, is referring back to someone who wrote it much earlier. That's called, it's redacted back to someone who is saying this much earlier. And what you're trying to do is you're looking at what the compiler is saying and seeing if there's any bias from what they got it from. So that's called redacted criticism. You look and see how it's been taken from the very beginning and how it's interpreted. Is there any bias built into that? Source criticism is trying to find the original source. So then you want to go back to the source of that. You try to find if there's any original source that you can go to see how much of a bias has happened between the time it was originally written down and the editor or the compiler then wrote it down. In the case of Islam, we're talking about 200 to 300 years. The source is, where is the source? We're going to find that it's even later than that, but he's not going to admit that in this period. And then form criticism is getting behind what the person has written, what the final story is that they've written, and looking at the form of the text itself and seeing what, especially in oral tradition, what the oral tradition may have said. And then when it was finally written down from that oral tradition, are there any differences? Has it evolved? Has it been accreted or deleted or corrupted along the way? So that's form criticism. Now, all four of those have been applied to the Bible, and he is correct. That's the beauty of the Bible. We've had this for 200, this has been going on since the 1800s, Hatun. The Bible is the only piece of literature that has had all these criticisms, redacted, source, form, and textual criticisms applied to it. Okay, now we know the definitions of those forms of criticism. Let's see what he does with it.
Yeah, so in a sense, those works are important because when people dig into your manuscripts, when people dig into sources within it, are those dates, are those times, are those individuals who are mentioned where they really exist, the time and place it's talking about. When people dig into it, it helps us to be more confident on whether we can rely our scripture or not. So I like the work on manuscripts as well as source criticism stuff, because it helps me to be more confident that the Bible I am holding today in my hands are reliable, and of course as a Christian it's the word of God.
Absolutely. This is why this video is so important, because now you're going to see what he means by all of this, and he's going to apply one set of, well, I don't want to say what he's going to do. Let's just go and see what he says.
Okay. If I remember, so you did you say German scholarship started around 1900s to expand their work on Bible?
Late 1800s. So we're talking almost 200 years ago. It started within the University of Tübingen in Germany. People like Wellhausen and others started asking these very, and they're very good questions. How do we know that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John really knew what Jesus did and what Jesus said, since we don't have their original documents? We don't have any of the original texts. That the first complete manuscript doesn't appear till around 325. That's the 4th century. We have many scraps and many others that we can look at, and then we can do a comparison. So that's called textual criticism. But then you want to look at the earliest manuscripts. You want to look at the earliest church fathers quotations. You want to look at the lectionaries from the 6th century, and you want to look at the manuscript evidence, and you want to see, has it changed? Is there a manipulation? Is there an evolution in the change? And if there is, then you say, well, what is the reason for the changing? And is there a bias by those who are now introducing new text? That's called form and source criticism. Now, the textual criticism is looking at the text itself, doing an orthographical study of it, an epigraphical study of it, to see what are the dates for the text that we're looking at. And we're doing all of this now with the Quran, and we're doing it with the traditions. But let's get back to what he is saying, because that is the corpus of historical critical method, the HCM, as we call it. HCM, historical critical method. He is going to make a distinction now and do a comparison between his method, which is the Hadith sciences, versus the historical critical method. But we needed to stop to define what he said, what he means by that. All right, he didn't explain that. So now you know. Let's now go and see what else he says next.
Okay, let me just say thank you very much for your generosity in here, and then let's move on with Yasir Qadhi.
Criticism, form criticism, you have multiple theories within it. And you know, where did the Bible come from? Who authored the Bible? I mean, if you're a Christian, you're going to say God. Well, obviously, you know, if you're not a Christian, where did it come from? How do you begin this type of research? This is what the historical critical method began to do. And of course, eventually, what happened was a number of fields were formed within this historical critical method. And by and large, here's the irony, we as Muslims would agree with the conclusions that they have about the Bible. They now know, and we all know, the Bible was authored over many centuries. There's not just one author. It was redacted. They now know there's something called form criticism. There's something called, so for example, there's a thing, what did the quote unquote authors of the Bible actually intend? And how did later Christians misinterpret? And one of the things which we love, which is correct.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to pause here. He just made a couple of false statements in here.
Okay, now I want to hear what you think about what he just said. To me, I'm laughing. This is great.
It is not great. As a scholar, he just lied about my scripture. So
what's your problem, Hatun?
He is pointing out Bible is written by many different people, by putting that as a problem to his audience, because in his mind he's kind of expecting his audience know, as he thought, oh, Quran is just putting down by one person's stuff. Actually, yes, Bible is written down by many people from different time and different places, from Genesis to Revelation, and then it gives me the same story. Triune God created everything. Eternal Son of God stepped in and then died for sin of his people. And
but Hatun, do you see what he has just done? Do you see what he has just done? He's imposed his epistemology of the eternal Quran that has never been created, the uncreated Quran that has no errors, not one word, not one letter, that Allah has preserved it so that it is complete. Chapter 10, verse 15, chapter 18, verse 27, chapter 15, verse 9. He's imposed that epistemology on our Bible, when no Christian would ever say that God wrote the Bible. We know that men wrote it. We even know the names of the men that wrote it. We put the names of most of those men who did write it. We have never said anything different. The only thing we would say is it's inspired by God, but written by men. Where is this problem? So he's talking to a Muslim crowd, and immediately he's saying, this does not come from God. As you can see, because of historical criticism, we have now found out that it comes from men. Well, yep. Where in the world did he get the idea that we said any different? So he's trying to already besmirch biblical criticism because he's assuming that Christians are saying that today. I don't know of any Christians that say that God sat down and wrote every word. No, Matthew wrote Matthew, Mark wrote Mark, Moses wrote the first 5 books. We know that David wrote the Psalms. And so we know exactly, we already did that. So why is this a surprise? It's a surprise probably to his students because their epistemology, nothing can be written by men. It has to come from, not just from God, it has to be co-equal, coexisted with God eternally in heaven.
Yeah, so his implication is to his audience, see, Quran is the very word of Allah versus Bible is man-made book. That's what his audience are hearing from him.
Now, can you see, he has just done what he's been claiming others do to him. He has just done, by taking the things that none of us have ever said, he has imposed that upon us, that we're saying that, when we have never said this about our Bible. So the very thing he just spent 8 minutes trying to decry and say, don't take what I say and misconstrue what I'm saying, he just now did it within the next 2 minutes.
A number of fields were formed within this historical critical method. And by and large, here's the irony, we as Muslims would agree with the conclusions that they have about the Bible. They now know, and we all know, the Bible.
See, as a Muslim, he is agreeing with the conclusion of the historical critical method on the Bible.
All right. But it gets better. It gets better, Hatun. Go ahead.
It's always good that I don't watch these videos fully because it just caused me stumble.
All right.
God bless you. Many centuries. There's not.
Sorry?
Now, God bless you that you do get angry with this because this is such a manipulation of what the historical critical method is. The historical critical method is not just for the Bible. It's for every piece of literature. Anytime a piece of literature claims a historical claim, what is the Bible or the Quran or the Upanishads or the Vedas or the Bhagavad Gita or the Granth Sahib, the Book of Mormon, whatever piece of literature that comes from any faith makes a historical claim about a person living at a place, doing a certain thing, and in a certain time, historical critical method must be applied. He's assuming it can only be applied to the Bible and that they got it right. You know, hurrah, 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 they got it right, without saying, hold on a minute. The same then, if you're going to agree with it over here, you need to also agree with it over here. Let's see what he says.
Okay, those of you who are watching, don't miss the point. He agrees with the conclusion from the historical critic method regarding the Bible. Let's see how that's not going to work for the Hadith.
One author, it was redacted. They now know there's something called form criticism. There's something called, so for example, there's a thing, what did the quote unquote authors of the Bible actually intend? And how did later Christians misinterpret? And one of the things which we love, which is correct, the phrase when Jesus says, I'm the Son of Man, I'm the Son of God, right? Biblical scholars in the Western Academy point out what later Christians derived is not what the original authors intended. And for us as Muslims, like, yes, that's exactly what we say.
Okay, right there. That's a beautiful example. So what he is taking, when Jesus claimed to be the Son of Man, and see, Muslims love this title because it's found 25 times in the New Testament. And I've heard, I mean, you've heard this as well, Hatun. Every Muslim keeps on saying, see, Jesus claims to be the Son of Man, which means he's a man. He is claiming to be a man. And we say, hold on a minute. What's the definition of Son of Man? You need to go back to Daniel chapter 7, verse 14. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 14, it's very clear that the Son of Man is from everlasting to everlasting, who has all authority over all tribes, nation, peoples, and tongues. So when every one of us who reads both the Old Testament and the New Testament together, and we see when Jesus makes this claim, and we see the reaction of the Jews who were listening to him, because the Jews had read Daniel chapter 7:14, they know what he was saying is, I am God, because only God is from everlasting to everlasting. Only God has authority over all tribes, nation, peoples, and tongues. Now, what he is saying is, this is terrible that you're interpreting what Jesus is saying from the Old Testament origins. Well, that's exactly what you have to do when you look at the Bible, because Jesus was quoting that phrase and applying it to himself, because the Jews knew exactly when he quoted and claimed to be the Son of Man. Basically, what he was saying is, I am God. So when Muslims ask us, where in the world did Jesus ever claim to be I am God? Every time he claimed to be the Son of Man, he was saying, I am God. Not in English, not even in Arabic, but he was doing it in Hebrew because he was speaking at that time to Hebrew hearers. Okay?
And in the same chapter, it talks about like, oh, are you the son of the mighty one? It's just like, seriously, because it meets with your agenda doesn't mean you can just butcher my scripture, Shaykh Yasir Qadhi. Seriously, like when we started the live stream, J. Smith was saying, oh, this guy is honest, all this. J. Smith doesn't look like this guy is honest when it comes to my Bible. It's really not good, really not good.
God bless you. Yes, you're right. He is not honest on these points, but he is actually trying to be. And the fact is, he will, and you will see, his honesty is going to kill him. Well, I better be careful. I don't really mean literally kill him, please, folks. Don't misquote me on this. But you're going to see it's going to kill his argument. So let's go ahead.
Also, just on the topic of the Son of God, John chapter 5, Jesus makes a claim that he's the Son of God. People who are listening him, taking this as he's blaspheming, he's making himself equal with God. John chapter 19, very title of Son of God, caused him to get to the cross. So, yes, when he claims that he's Son of God, people understood that he's Son of God. And that's what he meant.
Absolutely.
I'll deal with that part in another video. What is 11 minutes of this video?
Jesus never said he's the Son of God. Jesus never said he is divine. So my point is that philosophy, it kind of sort of worked with the Bible. And by and large, the Western Academy has demonstrated that its paradigm is valid on these other books. Now, 100 years ago, when the Academy turned its attention to the Quran, well, then what are they going to use? The same tools they've derived for the Bible, they're going to apply to the Quran. And then...
Yeah, that very tools, you really liked it when they used for the Bible, right?
Okay, keep going. It gets better. Just keep going.
7 years ago, they began applying it to the Hadith as well. And of course, this is where we will have to say, we will not agree with those tools on our faith tradition. Because
Oh, sorry, Jay. Like, it's good. Really, I don't listen those things early because like it just, yeah. So you are agreeing when they are using those tools for the Bible because, oh yeah, you heard something that it can meet with your agenda, but now it comes to the Quran and the Hadith. Oh no, you are not going to allow this to be used for your faith tradition.
I'm just going to sit back and watch your expressions. This is great, Hatun. You're hearing this for the first time. Am I correct?
I just listened like first 10 minutes or something when I
Okay,
was.
now we're getting into the juicy stuff. Okay, and listen, this is great. So almost everybody who is listening to us, you're hearing it for the first time. Hatun is hearing it for the first time. I've listened to this about 2 or 3 times, and I've taken copious notes, so I know exactly where he's going next. But you need to listen to him. Why? Because this is the man who is the spokesman for really the Western world when it comes to Islam, because of the fact of his prestige, because of the fact of his learning and his academic credentials, both over here in Yale University and also in Medina. That's why this is really an eye-opener, and you're going to see now what he means by that. So already, Hatun, you're upset because of the fact that it's okay to apply form critical and all these historical critical methods over here to the Bible, but don't touch our Quran and don't touch our Hadith.
No, it's not only that. It's also, oh yeah, like I like it when you do it to the other scripture, but oh, we don't like it when you do it to our scripture. Plus, he intentionally misrepresented my Bible.
Okay,
that's just wrong. Just wrong.
Let's go ahead.
Those tools are not neutral. There is no such thing as ultimate neutrality.
Okay, stop right there. Stop right there. Stop right there.
You're coming from a.
So right away, now he has put down his flag. This is very important, what he said there. The historical critical method is not neutral. Already, he's saying there's a bias built into it. Of course, for him as a Muslim, he's going to say there's a bias. Yet for anybody else in the world, notice all the Christians, because most Christians have now come over to the historical critical method. We understand it now. We actually apply it. We have to learn it in seminary. All of us have had to have it in our degree program. I had to have it at Fuller Seminary. I had to learn it when I was at Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary. I had to learn it when I was at Covenant Seminary. On all 3 seminaries, I had to learn the historical critical method. And so it comes out of our pores because for us, in order for us to be held accountable to the wider world, to the secular world and the academic world, you're going to have to apply the historical critical method because as far as the world is concerned, this is the most neutral of all criticisms. Already he's now saying this is not neutral. All right? You need to make that point. So he is already criticizing the historical critical method now as not being neutral. Well, as Christians, we understand what he is saying, but we still have to live over here. We've had to live over here for 200 years in the historical critical method camp. And so we do not make such really, it is an embarrassing claim to make that claim, to start up with his defense. But he has to say that for those who are listening to him there at Epic Center, okay?
But didn't he just, you encouraged his audience to use the historical method to critique identity and work of Lord Jesus Christ?
Absolutely. On the Bible, it's fine to do, but you don't bring it over here. Why? Because it has a bias. The one thing that doesn't have is a bias. That's why it was created. Because Christians have a bias, we do, and Muslims have a bias, but the historical critical method is neutral. It doesn't come from a biased position. It comes from a historical standpoint, a standard that everybody agrees upon. And if you don't agree upon, perfect it, get it better, so that all the biases have been taken out. So we assume. Now, however, we understand that when you use the historical critical method on the Bible, especially when it comes to things like miracles, whenever Jesus does a miracle, a scholar or somebody who is an academic or who is a secular person would say, I can throw that out because we don't believe that miracles exist today. But there you're getting a bias. You're putting a bias into what you're throwing out. So either way, there's a bias. There are always biases, that's true. But the historical critical method is as neutral as you can get. That's why it is being used all over the world and has been for 200 years. Okay?
If someone doesn't want you to question their faith, basic lesson is, everyone, you've got to keep away from that faith. That's the very basic lesson.
Faith-based paradigm. And so, for example, one simple example, they would never consider an explanation of anything to be, well, because Allah did a miracle. That's not something the academy can take into account. So a simple example, one of the main areas of research in the Western Academy is about the stories of the Quran. They love it. I also love the stories of the Quran, but I treat very differently. What does the Western Academy care about the stories? For them, the stories represent the clues that they need to figure out where the ideas of the Quran came from. So they're going to find a story in the Old Testament, a story in the Syriac legends, a story here and there, and they're going to say, oh, this is obvious, therefore, that the author or authors of the Quran were influenced by this legend, this story, this, that. And that's their explanation. Now, obviously, this is a secular explanation, because what they're ignoring is the most obvious explanation for a believer, which is, well, the reason why there's parallels is because the source is the same. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason why there's a story of the flood in the Old Testament and the flood in the Quran, the reason why Moses is here, the reason why Isa, and of course it gets more complicated because there are some stories of Jesus that are not found in the New Testament, but they are found in what are called Apocrypha, books that did not make it to the New Testament. So they were not known to the most of mankind. So, for example, the Quranic story of Jesus speaking from the cradle. This is not in the New Testament. It's not there. Where is it? It's actually found in one of the Apocrypha, which was only discovered, 80 years ago in some grave in Egypt, the Coptic Bible, the secret Coptic Bible, right? It was discovered in that one. How would a man in Mecca have access to that Bible when the majority of Christians didn't have access to it? You understand?
Okay, okay. This is a good place to stop. He's ready for chapter 3, verse 46, the story of Isa speaking from the cradle, defending his mother, Mary. And so that story is there in the Quran. And so you need to say, why is that on in the Bible? It's because, and we know where it comes from. It comes from the Arabic infancy gospel. And also another name for it's called the Syriac infancy gospel, which is from the 4th century. So what his view is, the way he interprets that is, oh, isn't that interesting? Allah gave him to these Gnostic writers, these later Christian writers, who wrote this and did an enormous amount of stories. Not in that, also that same infancy gospel, you will find Jesus taking some birds, forming into clay and blowing on them, and they're flying up into the air. These are amazing stories, but they were never accepted by the early church fathers for one very simple reason. They were written way, way, way too late. They're written in the 4th century. So why would you ever include them? And they were nothing more than folk tales about Jesus' infancy. So we leave them out of the Bible because they're written so late. He says we have to keep them in the Quran because these come from Allah himself. Therefore, how could Muhammad, one man living in Mecca, far away from these shores, how could he have known of this story? Well, what he doesn't know, and what we are saying is, had nothing to do with Muhammad. Now, that's controversial, even though I'm going to say that. It had much to do with later writers who knew about these stories. In fact, we're doing this right now. We have a committee. We're putting together, there's 6 of us who are looking at all these stories in the Quran, and we're going to the antecedents for all these stories. And they are Jewish, apocryphal writings. We're finding their Christian sectarian writings. We're finding Ethiopic writings. We're finding Zoroastrian writings. We're even finding Chinese writings that have made their way into the Quran. Almost all of them in the 8th and the 9th and the 10th century, when all these writings were percolating up in the north, in places like Baghdad and Damascus, and in places like Petra, every place in Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. But all of these writings were percolating, and they were easily available for those who took them into Arabic. And many times they took synopses or they took summaries of them, and they put them into Arabic, and then they introduced them into the Quran. So these have nothing to do with a man named Muhammad, but from his premise, How could an illiterate man living in Mecca and Medina have known of these stories when these stories were never there that far south in a place in a desert environment? So from his standpoint, this is a miracle. From our standpoint, looking at it from a historical standpoint, historical critical standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world when we look at all the manuscripts that the Quran has. They're all late, they're all up in the north, and these stories were all there. And what's most interesting is that we now know that the earliest Arabic translation of the New Testament was not written until, let me get this right, until 768, the late 8th century. No, 868. Sorry, 868. The late 9th century, we get the first Arabic translation of the New Testament. And it's a copy of it there today, the Codex Sinaiticus 151. That is 200 years after the fact, after Muhammad, if he'd existed. It's 200 years later that we get the first Arabic Bible. So what means those who were putting the Quran together did not have access to the original text, the original Bible. They only had access to these many, many stories. So from a historical critical analysis standpoint, we now understand why these stories are there and why they don't take the real stories. We look at the stories of the Old Testament prophets. Look at the story of Cain and Abel in chapter 5, verse 31 and 32, killing his brother and burying his brother like the raven that he sees exampled in the ground. That we don't see that anywhere in the Old Testament. Or in chapter 21, the story of Abraham going into the Masjid al-Haram. Notice not into the Kaaba, into the Masjid al-Haram and destroying all the idols, and then coming out the next morning, being grabbed by the people and thrown into a fiery pit. That is not in our Bible. The story of Cain and Abel, we know where it comes from. The story of Cain and Abel comes from the Targum of Jonathan ben Uzziah, written in the 2nd century for Jews. They have kept it, but it was then translated into Arabic in the subsequent centuries. The story of Abraham in the Masjid al-Haram is actually from the Mishnah of Rabbah, another 2nd century Jewish apocryphal writing. The story of Solomon and Sheba and the Hoopoe bird, found in Surah 29, verses 17 to 44. That comes straight out of the 2nd Torah of Esther. So these are well-known documents. You can go to your libraries and still get them today, written by Jews in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century. So they would have been, and they're all there in the libraries in Baghdad and also in Damascus. So those who were putting the Quran together in the 8th and 9th century would have access to these stories, and it's these stories which make their way into the Quran today, in chapter 5, in chapter 21, and in chapter 29. In chapter 27 for Solomon. But can you see from his perspective is, how could Muhammad, a single man who could not read or write down in Mecca, who between 610 and 632, who never went up and saw these stories, how could he have known about these stories so accurately? And of course, his way of looking at that is, this is a miracle of Allah. A historical critical method of looking at that is, no, this makes all the sense in the world. There was no Arabic Bible for them to go to, or even the Old Testament for them to go to. Therefore, they went to these stories, which were percolating all over that part of the world. It's called the Levant. That's why they make their way into the Quran. And that's why he has a difficulty to explain it. But you can see from his students, thank you, Yasir Qadhi. You've just said this is a miracle.
So I'll make a couple of points addition to what you've said. First of all, according to Islamic, okay, let's start first thing. The part when he says, oh, those infinity gospels were not known until I think he said 80 years ago. That's in his dream.
He says the Coptic Bible was discovered 80 years ago. It was not the Coptic Bible that these stories come from. These are the Arabic infancy gospel and the Syriac infancy gospel, which come from 4th century. We have documents, so he's got that wrong completely.
Yeah, but he also said like no one knew about these things until like 80 years ago.
No, they did. Listen, 100 years ago, we have our good friend Arthur Jeffrey referring to this. We also have St. Clair's Tisdale in 1905 referring to these stories. So this is not true. It's just he's not aware of these writers.
Okay. Yeah, Yasir Qadhi is doing like proper misrepresentation there.
Well, it's just because he's not aware of these Christian writers who are already exposing this in 1905, over 100 years ago. And they were doing it in German mostly. So that's why, unfortunately, he's not aware of the German scholarship.
I'll say you are very charitable to him. If I remember correctly, according
I have to be, because of what's happened to me in the last week.
if I understand correctly, or if I remember correctly, according to the Islamic tradition, Waraka was already this is according to the Islamic tradition. He had the Gospels in Arabic, or he was translating them to in Arabic. So I think it is really unfair of him to say, "Oh yeah, like this was just like brand new to everyone until 80 years ago someone discovered those apocryphal writings." Like in his mind it looks like he just thinks like in 6th and 7th century Arabia, these Arabs or Muslims or followers of Muhammad were living somewhere in sky, had no contact with the Christian tradition down on planet Earth. And
Yeah.
that's like really misrepresentation of Islamic tradition.
Yeah.
The main question is, while Quran confirms the preservation and authority of the Bible, then main question is why the stories which has been identified as not the word of God end up in the Quran, which is identified as the word of Allah, eternal word of Allah.
I mean,
How are
that's
you
a
going to fix that mess, Shaykh Yasir Qadhi?
I mean, Hatun, you're right. I mean, this is a whole corollary that you could go on. If he's saying that the historical critical method is great and is correct, and we would agree with it, that the Bible has many problems. And then the question you're bringing is, well, then if that is the case, then why is your Quran in chapter 10, verse 94, in chapter 21, verse 7, saying for us to go and read the Bible if you have any questions, because we have been given the Torah and the Injil? Why does your Quran in chapter 4, verse 136 say that we are supposed to, that both the Quran and the Bible come from Allah himself? And why is it in chapter 5, verse 46 and 47, and especially verse 68, tell Christians to go to those scriptures because they are from Allah himself? So he's not even dealt with that question, because he's going to have to look at the internal support for the Bible over and over and over and over again. In fact, you can't find one verse in the Quran that says that our Bible has been corrupted or changed or manipulated or created or deleted. It just does not exist. So he's not even got into that. But again, that's for another time, for another episode that we can get into that.
Yeah, but by pointing, oh yeah, those apocryphal stories now in the Quran, it confirms that Bible is not preserved, but Quran is the word of Allah, seems like very stupid argument.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, he even got the wrong. He even got the source for that story in chapter 3, verse 46 incorrect.
Yeah. And isn't that like this Coptic gospel is something like new? I heard that a couple of months ago, and then when I looked into it, it was talking about like some recent argument stuff. But
I'm not sure. I'm going to be agnostic on this, but what we do know is it goes way beyond 80 years ago. Listen, we have good scholars in Europe who are actually writing on this, the intertextual argument way back in 1905. That's over 100 years ago. And not from the sources he's talking about. They're going way beyond the Coptic Gospels. They're going right back to the 4th century Arabic infancy Gospels. Those are the ones that are the most damaging for the Quran.
Yeah. Let me just respond to the comment. So, according to Bukhari, Waraka had been converted to Christianity in the pre-Islamic period and used to write Arabic and write the Gospels in Arabic. That's what the Hadith says. When we look at the Surah, we get to see Muslims are very much aware of John Gospel. Muslims are very much aware of who is writing which Gospels. So that's kind of comment to the brother Hussein, but I'm sure he already knew these things and probably he knows better than me on those things.
And if you look at the earliest debates in the 7th and 8th, I mean, certainly the one that's in the 7th, and there are 2 or 3 in the 8th century and the 9th century between Christians and Muslims in the 8th and 9th century especially, notice that the debates are almost always on the Bible. They're not on the Quran. Why is it that they're only arguing on the Bible, and they're all arguing the divinity and the Trinity, the divinity of Jesus and the Trinity and the sonship of Jesus Christ? Why are all those debates concentrated on that subject and only on biblical text and nothing Quranic? Suggesting that is the only text that was around at that time for them to debate, as late as the late 8th century. So obviously, these ideas of a Quran with these stories in it was not yet formed, or I can only assume they were not yet formed this late. in order to debate it. Okay?
Okay.
Let's continue on.
Yeah, so I need to find the page. Just a second. Okay.
A lot of questions, right? For us, the answer is pretty obvious. And that is, it actually happened. And so that Bible recorded a version, and the Quran also recorded a version. It's not exactly the same because Christians didn't get it fully right, but the concept of Jesus speaking as a child is in that version. And the Quran has Jesus speaking as a child. You get my point here, right? The Western Academy would never allow for what? For a divine explanation. So they have to make up in a different way. And
yeah, and then same Western Academy is going to say, oh, excuse me, the story was never kind of written in 1st century. How come that story kind of pretended to be real in 7th century, 8th century? That's Western Academy is going to ask you that as well, Shaykh Yasir Qadhi.
No, and he's completely misrepresented the Western Academy in what he just said. Did you see that? What he says, the Western Academy will not accept it because it's a miracle. That's not what the Western Academy is saying. What they're not accepting and what they're confronting is that these sources for these stories are found in multiple versions that are much earlier, and they're all way up in the north. And therefore they cannot have come from a man who is living in the south, where none of these documents existed, especially in a place that's nothing more than a hamlet. And in one case, possibly we have no reference that it even existed. So that's what they're saying. The Western Academy on this side is not disputing whether or not a prophet believed in miracles or whether or not Christians believe in miracles. They accept that we believe in miracles, and they accept that Muslims believe in miracles. What they're saying is that the story itself already has an antecedent, and it's copied from that antecedent, where they should have copied it from the real story, the biblical account. But they're not disputing the biblical account. The historical method is not disputing that they are disputing exactly who wrote our stories, and that's a good dispute. But we have pretty much covered that in the last 200 years, and we have such a historical textual support for it now that most historical critical scholars are no longer really wasting their time on the Bible. They're now focusing over here, and this is why he's getting in the hot seat. He doesn't want them to focus over here. Using the same criteria applied to the Bible, he does not want them. And his idea is, it's just because we have miracles. No, it's not because you have miracles. It's because of the historical problems with what you're saying. That's what they're really saying.
So we are almost halfway through the video. So far, what I learned is, if you cannot defend what you are saying, all you need to do is go and attack Christian faith. That's so far what I heard.
It's called deflection.
It's pretty obvious to me. I mean, when they're not going to accept the Quran to be from Allah, why would they accept Hadith to be from the Prophet? It's obvious to me. I personally don't think I said anything that controversial, but I understand it is what it is. Let me give you an example. My first exposure to Hadith studies in the Western Academy, this is literally 21 years ago. I was taking my first class, meaning the semester, not the first day, but the semester we take. And of course, you're introduced to the Western method in the first class, obviously, right? And our professor, his name is Professor Gutas, you could look him up. Our professor at the time, we had to do an isnad analysis. So we go over and we bring all the chains. So he's teaching us the Western, isnad system. And I forgot, it's been a long while, but I forgot which hadith, but basically it converged on, I want to say Sufyan al-Thawri or Malik ibn Anas. I forgot which of the, giants. So we had like 10 chains. And all of the chains, they went all the way back to, let's just give an example, Imam Malik, then Nafi, and then Ibn Umar, then the Prophet. Okay, so we clearly found all of these books and all of these chains are going back to Imam Malik, and then from Malik to Nafi to Ibn Umar to the Prophet. So he began, speaking like this, so the common link is Malik, the source is Malik, the origin is Malik, speaking like this. And I'm straight out of Kulliyat al-Hadith in, Medina. And I just ask a very naive and awkward question because I'm not figuring out what is he saying? And I literally asked him point blank, are you insinuating that Malik ibn Anas just fabricated the hadith out of thin air? Are you insinuating that if all these chains link back to him, that he is because you're calling him the origin, the source, the common link, right? And he just looks straight at me and he goes, I never forget this. Well, prima facie, that cannot be ruled out, meaning that is a logical possibility, yes. And at that stage, I literally said, I need to do my PhD in Hadith studies, not Ibn Taymiyyah. For a few months, I wanted to do my PhD in Hadith studies because I didn't even know how to respond because the blasé attitude. Yeah, maybe Malik just fabricated, a hadith about the Prophet.
Okay,
See,
let's
this
stop
is
here.
the fundamental difference. The historical method.
Let me explain what he's just said. Okay, Imam Malik is where all the chains start with. Okay, they all start with him. That's where it's first written down. And we need to put dates here. So Imam Malik is known as Imam Malik ibn Abbas. Imam Malik ibn Abbas was born in 711 and died in 795. So late 8th century is where all the chains, these isnads. So-and-so got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, who got it from Ibn Malik, all right? So they're writing in the 9th and 10th century, as we're going to find, as we now know, they're not even the 9th and 10th century. They don't begin to appear in extant form until the 11th century. Nonetheless, all these chains, they go to Imam Malik. And then from Imam Malik, the understanding is that Imam Malik got it from a guy named Abu al-Nasr, who was a freed slave of Umar, and he died in 735. And he got it from Abdullah ibn Umar, who was a companion of the Prophet, who died in 693. So 693, this Umar, he's a companion, he's a Sahaba, he's listening to Muhammad, and he's watching what Muhammad said, and he's writing down by memory what Muhammad said. And then he doesn't write it down. He doesn't write anything down. He just memorizes what Muhammad said. And then his slave, who was known as Abu al-Nasr, who died in 735, he then recites and memorizes what Umar said. He then memorizes it. And then it's Imam Malik who comes in 711. So he's only had about 20 years with him because Nasr dies in 735. Imam Malik is born in 711. So you can see there's only 20 years. He's only 20 years old before Nasr dies. So he hears this from this freed slave. He has a 20-year period to memorize everything. And then he is the one that supposedly writes it down, but we don't even have anything from Ibn Malik. We don't have anything from 795 at all. Not one extant manuscript. So already he's going to have a problem trying to define this. And that's why this Yale scholar made that point. Prima facie, it looks like we know nothing before Imam Malik. We have nothing written down. He's already giving lip service to our good friend Yasir Qadhi. At least he's saying, okay, we can't go any earlier than Imam Malik. We can't go any earlier than 795. But even that Yale professor knows that we have nothing written by Ibn Malik. It doesn't get written down until the 9th and 10th century, referring back through oral tradition, hearsay, back to Imam Malik. All right? That's what he's saying. Now let's continue on. Do you have any question on that before we go on?
No, I think you put something on your mic. Did you cover up your mic? Your sound has changed.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I could hear you. It was just not as clear as now. So Imam Malik was born 715, died 795. So you are telling me Imam Malik kind of born just over 80 years after the death of Mohammed, who kind of become the leader of one of the Muslim community. 80 years after the death of Muhammad, he was born. So let's say he learned approximate 100 years after Muhammad, where he's passing through all those hadiths.
Yeah, and again, nothing written down. It's just what he memorized. He then repeated, and what he repeated, others memorized, and then they repeated. And then others memorize what they were repeating. So it's memory. Nothing written down.
So Yasir Qadhi is questioning his teacher regarding his teacher is saying, well, sources is this, source of is the same, source is the same. So man who is like almost 100 years after death of Muhammad is the source of everything. Yasir Qadhi is just like, oh, are you saying he made these things up or not?
Yeah, that's his question. And of course, the scholar over here from a historical critical method, prima facie, yes, how can we say any different since nothing was written down?
Yeah, now, we cannot rule that out.
Here we go. Now he's explained how he knows that Imam Malik is correct.
Begins with the premise of skepticism. It doesn't understand the reality of Iman. And I get it in the sense, guys, when I say I get it, it's not an endorsement. Like when the Quraysh came to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq.
Okay, stop there real quickly.
You know that your companion is.
Okay, he's used an Arabic word, iman. Iman means faith. You have to have faith that Imam Malik is what. So it's not Imam as the Imam Malik as a title for a person. It's Iman with an N. Okay, let's make sure we don't confuse these two words. So he's saying we in the Muslim community, we have faith that Imam Malik got it right.
Because of our faith, we believe he got it right.
Yeah.
Claiming that he went to Jerusalem and he came back the same night. Do you believe him? What did Abu Bakr as-Siddiq say? Did he start quoting Einstein in quantum physics and start proving with mathematical equations that speed, travel, light is travel? Did he start trying to prove scientifically? Or did he just say, look, I know you won't get it, but I get it. This is what I'm saying. It's logical to have Iman. It's not illogical. It's logical. When you have Iman, you understand Imam Malik would not, it's impossible for Imam Malik to fabricate just off the top of his head. But when you don't have Iman and you don't understand the repercussions of Iman, you've never really lived in a bubble of Iman, then the evidence to you would suggest when it's going through Malik and there's no other person, just suppose there's no other person except, Malik. And there are a number of hadith like this that they go through chains to the tabi'un or whatever like that. So your assumption then from your paradigm would be, well, the source is, Malik. So my point is that the context of the question that I was asked coming from a secular paradigm, and I simply pointed out factually, I get it from the Western paradigm. They will only go so far, and then it's a trust issue, which I firmly agree with. I mean, another issue is we have in Islam something called the status of the companions being adalat al-sahaba, meaning companions of the Prophet ﷺ will never lie about the Prophet ﷺ. Now, is this a faith-based or an empirical-based claim? Which of the two is it? I'm asking you. It's faith-based. It's faith-based, right? From their perspective, literally, I'm giving an example that there is a tradition about obeying the ruler. And
okay, can we stop that just a minute?
Say, well, this is
huge what he just said. Did you pick it up? I saw you laughing. You must have picked it up, Hatun.
So because we believe that none of the Sahaba is companions of Muhammad will ever lie, therefore everything must be truth. We believe, because we believe, we've got this attitude, therefore they will never lie.
Now remember in our last episode together, we went through the same thing with Shabir Ali. Dr. Shabir Ali considered to be probably the other equivalent scholar here in the West, probably more so than any other. I would say Yasir Qadhi is more highly respected, but Dr. Shabir Ali out of Toronto is also equally respected. When asked the same question, remember what he said about the Sahaba. He said that the Sahaba are accepted. We accept what they say due to four things. Because they are pious, because they are, in other words, they are sinless. Number two, of their piety, not sinless, but that their piety, they are truthful. Number two, because of their truthworthiness, because they never lie. Number three, because of their ability to memorize 100% accurately. And then number four, their ability to pass what they memorize on to the next generation, absolutely correct. Those four things. So Shabir Ali and Yasir Qadhi would agree. It's just Yasir Qadhi hasn't said this. So take that together. Now, how many are we talking about? Remember what Dr. Shabir Ali said. These are the Sahaba. These are the ones who were there with Muhammad, who were watching what Muhammad did and hearing what Muhammad said. The equivalent we have in Christianity would be Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They would be our Sahaba. Our Sahaba would be Matthew and John, who were with Jesus for 3 years. They saw what he did and they heard what he said. But they wrote it down immediately or soon after or within a few years, but within their lifetime, all right? That's the difference. In this case, we don't sit there and say, were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John pious, or were they trustworthy, or did they have a great memory? Because they didn't need to be these. They wrote down what they saw. We don't demand of that what they do. And so therefore, we don't start from that paradigm that they start with. And can you see already, you're seeing a huge disconnect between over here, the academy, and over here, the Muslim community. For the Muslim community, they immediately impose on these, how many of them? Remember what Shabir Ali said? 120,000 of these Sahaba. Stop and think that number through. So they assume that 120,000 of these Sahaba who were around Muhammad in Mecca and Medina were absolutely pious, they were trustworthy, they had perfect memory, and they had 100% accuracy in passing it on. If you start from that paradigm and you start from that epistemology, over here, we're laughing at this, and you laughed at it when you heard it. I laughed at it when I heard it. I said, can you be serious? Nobody in Western and academia would accept that for one very good reason. Who in the world knew whether they were pious? How do we know that they were trustworthy? How in the world do we think that they had 100% accuracy? And how do we know in any shape or form that what they passed on was then not reinterpreted and accreted and deleted and polluted and corrupted throughout the many different irradiations? Because in every one of these traditions that al-Bukhari finally wrote down, there are about anywhere from 5 to 6, as many as 8 different persons that passed this down. And were they all perfect? Were they all pious? Were they all trustworthy? And was their memory perfect? Can you see? This to me is incredulous that people haven't confronted this before. And why is it we're going to have to do so just for one talk, 30 minutes long, that he happened to give to his students that finally is exposing this to the whole world? Okay, so that's why we need to make sure. And though seems funny to us, that's exactly everything that they're dependent on. That these Sahaba were absolutely pious and trustworthy and had beautiful memory, and everything they passed on was 100% accurate.
I'm just going to ask you gently to make sure you do not have jihad with the papers in front of you that is on the mic. Okay, separate them. One of the things you are saying, like how Shabir Ali's criteria regarding these individuals who are narrating Hadith. He kind of calls them, yeah, they are all good guys, they've got good memory, all these kind of things. And then by end of the video, you get to watch another video on Hadith, and then he states, well, we don't think that Hadith is reliable, and then he just throws it in the bin. I find those things strange, but that's the way of Muslim mind works. So you start with, we trust what the Sahaba says, because we believe that Sahabas are good guys, they are trustworthy. Therefore, think about the implication of that people. Look at the Hadith and how Muslims are practicing Hadith today, from the child marriage to all other things, because their Sahabas are trustworthy, they will never lie to you. So, same thing, Yasir Qadhi, they will never lie to us. There is no reason for us to question them. Therefore, they said it, we believe it. There is no need anyone from outside to come and critique that area. We don't need that. That's what he's simply saying to us.
It seems to suggest that at this period when Muhammad was living between 610 and 632, there was something that was put in the water that made them all pure and trustworthy and truthful, and suddenly they had an ability to memorize everything that Muhammad said and everything Muhammad did, and that it was then passed on. And then somehow, when Muhammad died, this water, I'm being facetious, don't get me, there's nowhere that I'm saying, it just seems to me that there was a kind of an air that came across the community, and only this community were perfect from any other community that has come subsequent to that time. Although he will say that what was passed on accurately for hundreds of years. So all of them who received it also has to be equally pious and trustworthy and have great memory, and also were accurate, 100% accurate in every case, not just the Sahaba. Okay, so that really gets interesting, but let's continue on.
Okay, let me just make a point, just quick side point, okay? Abu Huraira, he pulled together approximately over 5,000 hadiths. He's one of the guy who is he's the top guy when it comes to the hadith he narrates, okay? Approximately 5,000. He spent only 3 years with Muhammad, and that was Muhammad's last years. You've got Ibn Malik. He was like 10 years old when he was with Muhammad.
Wait. No, he was born in 711.
No, I'm talking about Anas ibn Malik.
Oh, okay. You're talking about Imam. You're not talking about Imam Malik then.
Not Imam Malik, Anas ibn Malik. So he was like with Muhammad, like when you kind of think through, for example, Abdullah ibn Abbas, like he was with Muhammad only for 3 years. And suddenly those people are giving us huge numbers of hadith that affecting the lifestyle of Muslims as well as their doctrine. And Yasir Qadhi is telling us, well, this 10 years old child was like, had a miraculous memory. That person spent 3 years with Muhammad. He pulled together lots of hadith for us. He's just like, good. There is no reason for us to question him. I find that's like strangely strange, because when you are looking at their biography, you can't find that much, I don't know, reliable information there. But Muslim mind works differently.
Now, to be fair, just so we get this correct, if you talk to a Muslim or a scholar, Muslim scholar today, they will say that there are many chains that were weak, Taif, and these are names of people that are known to have lied, or people that they're not saying the Sahaba now. They're not saying Sahaba. Subsequent to the Sahaba and subsequent to the Tabi'u, the second generation, you start getting chains that become weak. But the golden chain, they call it the golden chain, are these four: Imam Malik, Abdul al-Nasr, and Abdullah ibn Umar. Those are the four. And then, of course, Muhammad himself. So the four would be Muhammad, that who Abdul ibn Umar then got it from, who said to pass it on to Abu al-Nasr, who passed it on to Imam Malik ibn Abbas. And so that's why everybody is looking for that golden chain. And when you get to that golden chain, you get Sahih, that it is the hardest. But there are others who are outside of that chain. We do know that that Imam Malik learned from 900 different teachers, 900 other chains, 900 other derivations. So even as early as Imam Malik, you have many, many other teachers that he learned from. But the golden one is through Nasr and Umar.
Well, I don't know. I've got like questions on all these names. Abdullah ibn Umar, you mentioned, he was with Muhammad for 10 years. And when he was with Muhammad, he was age 12. He apparently fight in the like I remember reading something about it, about the Battle of Badr stuff, but like in my mind it's questionable. And that's very, isn't it Abdullah ibn Umar who says like, oh, we cannot say we've got a whole Quran because we don't say we've got the whole Quran, say we've got whatever left. But anyway, so Yasir Qadhi is telling us,
that comes from much less, Al-Suyuti, which is 16th century.
But
you do have Umar, who is referring to the verse on Rajam. The verse on Rajam. I am surprised. What are we going to do when we used to stone and the Prophet used to stone? But now when people see that the chapter 24, verse 2, it now is 100 lashes, they're going to say, why have we changed what the Prophet did? So that is Umar. The verse on Rajam, chapter 24, verse 2.
Yeah, that wasn't what was in my mind. But anyway, okay, let's see. Trusting the Sahaba is faith-based. Let's continue from this part.
Convenient, where that he's the ruler and he's narrating a tradition about being the ruler. I'm just giving an example, right? They would say this. They don't understand the concept of adalat al-sahaba. They don't have that iman. So when I factually point out, obviously, I get it. Some people wanted me to be more, but this is not me. For me, this is not the context. The interview is 2 hours long, and at the very end, they asked this question. I simply factually stated there are two different paradigms in this regard. If you want to study this reality about the historical critical method and its own assumptions and biases, this is a very interesting topic. Maybe one day, I do plan to one day talk about it in a library chat. Obviously, well, by the way, if you want to read, in my opinion, the biggest name in this field, it is Talal Asad. Talal Asad, the son of Muhammad Asad. Muhammad Asad, if you know his famous biography that he wrote, The Road to Mecca, his son.
Okay, sorry, I just missed that part. So he is simply saying, towards the end of the 2 hours video, 2 hours thing, they asked me question about this topic, and then I answer the question, and I'm going to talk about it in a library chat. Is that what he's saying?
Yes, so he's going to do that later on. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I did something. Just a second. Screen become
is a genius, really, and he's written a number of books where he demonstrates the academy is not neutral. The academy has its own presumptions. Nobody is neutral here. You have others as well. Wa'il Halaq is another name. Saba Mahmoud in her own way has done this. Joseph Lombard. There's a number of people that have written some good articles that deconstruct the presumptions of the academy. And, you know, maybe one day I'll also talk about that as well. But I want to make a clear statement here. I'm trying to teach you to think long-term and critically. One of the issues that I have, I don't believe in simplifying or sugarcoating complex aspects. When I taught the seerah, I made a condition upon myself. Anything that's awkward by other people's standards, I'm not going to just ignore it. I don't believe that there's anything in our religion that we cannot defend. Everything we can defend it. But one of the things I feel, and this is where it gets complicated, I believe sometimes some people, many people, to defend our religion, they employ overly simplistic tactics to do so. And when they say simplistic platitudes or slogans that are factually incorrect, and they try to prove something that is correct, the critics of Islam come and they will obviously point out that what you said is wrong. And when they prove what is said is wrong, they attempt to then prove the final point is also wrong. And this is one of the reasons why there has been a number of issues or controversies about things that I've said. I don't personally believe in overly simplistic and ignoring some of the more awkward or difficult truths. And we live in a time and a place where all you need to do is one simple Google search, and you will find the exact same criticisms, the exact same, issues out there. Some of the preachers, and I get it, I'm not criticizing them. Some of the preachers, they have this good mentality of protecting the masses. They want to shelter your ears from hearing some of these awkward truths. And I get it. I don't want my kids to hear these awkward truths as well. But the problem comes, somebody should also address those awkward realities as well. Mm-hmm. Some people should preach simple, I understand, but some people should point out, guys, our hadith system is amazing and it is unprecedented and there's nothing like it. But yes, there are some aspects that require faith, and those aspects are logical and rational. I mean, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, after all that he's done, he's not going to lie about the Prophet. It's illogical to say this, but admit that this is a point, it's a logical leap of faith. I don't see this as illogical at all. And understand, if you don't believe in Allah, you don't believe in Iman, you don't understand Iman, then you can say Imam Malik fabricated it. It's coming from a paradigm that obviously, I understand why, but my understanding doesn't mean I'm sympathetic to it. And so when I'm operating in that paradigm, unfortunately, I do have to.
We need to stop there.
You have to deal with that reality and take that into account. So.
Okay, are you following what he's saying here, Hatun?
He's upset that people are approaching Islam without faith.
Yeah, that's it, and that's too simplistic. So his response to that is equally simplistic. So his response is, we just have faith. We just have faith that Imam Malik was perfect and pure and trustworthy and had absolute great memory and passed it on accurately. We just trust it. To me, that is equally simplistic. So for him to criticize people who are making simplistic responses to where is your science that supports that, his response is, well, listen, these people are being too simplistic. Let me tell you the real answer. The real answer, we have a leap of faith, is really what he's saying, which is absolutely simplistic, even more simplistic. And it's not going to convince us over here on the left. We're not convinced. The historical critical method is not being applied. And he's walking away from the historical critical method because he cannot answer the historical critical method. So what he has to come back with, the only thing he has for his Muslim followers is, we just have faith. We don't know how is it that Malik is truthful and pious and that he got it completely accurate, and that what was passed on was accurately passed on for another 200 years. And it looks like for another 400 years. Well, actually 300 years. But we just have faith. To me, that is not an answer for the people over here. And I would suggest he is equally simplistic, and he's not helping the cause at all.
Well, he spent all that time to prepare and then answer to his congregation why, or being accountable to his congregation why he said what. So
Now he's going to move. Now watch what he's going to do next. He is going to do the exact same thing that Shabir Ali did on the 28th. He's now going to do on the 31st, just 3 days apart.
Attacking Christians?
No, but hold on, you'll see.
Attacking. Okay.
Mind that I have, and that is that I wish I could say this is the final misunderstanding, but no, it's going to continuously happen, unfortunately. I don't aim to confuse you or to cause controversy, obviously, but controversy in and of itself is a natural element of any preaching and teaching. If it's not going to happen here, it's going to happen there. And obviously, I don't want to give the Islamophobes material, a'udhu billah, but I also believe being overly simplistic is actually the fundamental problem. Because when you try to defend that which can be defended in a way that you should not defend, then the Islamophobes attack your arguments. I believe you can easily defend the sanctity of the Quran. I believe you can easily defend the sanctity of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But I also believe the way that many others in the da'wah scene are doing it, in my humble opinion, is that they're opening themselves up to easy criticisms of their techniques. This is why there's a bit of a clash going on. And obviously, my brothers in Islam who have misunderstood my works, I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal keeps our hearts united and we minimize this. And also, I have to say this for the record. You know these da'wah online Islamophobes, not the da'wah, sorry, the Islamophobes that are engaged with the da'wah crowd. I mean, guys, none of them are academics, really. Frankly, they're failed academics. And I'm being blunt here, not just because they're attacking me, honestly. I really think we are exaggerating their importance far more. They're really a bunch of losers. Go look at their lifestyles. Go look at some of these are like they're convicted of beating their own fathers. One of the main guys attempted to murder his own father, went to jail, and he's one of the main guys that's on this Islamophobic industry. Others are complete failures.
Talking
look
about,
at their followings. My God, an average
David Wood
khatira I give has more views.
Sorry, he's talking about David Wood?
Yeah, that's David Wood, who tried to kill his father with a hammer. Yeah.
He's not even like giving his name in here. Oh, poor Yasir Qadhi. His materials are being used by Christians. A Christian who was in prison once.
I don't know if you remember back in 2020, after we exposed that interview that he had with Mohammed Hijab, and that went so viral at June the 20th, 2020. And remember, it went all over the internet. Well, back in November of that same year, November 26th, I think the exact date, he then put up an hour video and he called it the ultra crepidarians.
I remember that.
It was an attack against David Wood.
I mean, guys,
myself.
Calm down. Really, these people.
Sorry, it's my screen is playing around.
And Dr. Daniel Brubaker, which is one of the oddest things in the world. David and I, yes, attack us because we were the ones that really confronted and also exposed it and put it up all over the internet. So David and I, it makes sense that we are seen as ultra crepidarian. But why Daniel Brubaker? He had nothing to do with this debate. He never said one word about this debate, about the Qira'at. He doesn't even, Daniel Brubaker is one of my professors on our MAPI course. And he does not answer the Qira'at or the Ahruf argument. That's your argument, Hatun. That's my argument. And so what in the world was Yasir Qadhi doing? So that's what he's getting at. He's getting at those of us who have confronted him on the Qira'at argument. We are the Islamophobes, and that's why he's besmirching our characters. He doesn't dare give us the names out, because then he could be put up for libel. So that's why he has to be careful.
Okay. So I know David Wood is involved with philosophy. So I am just on Wikipedia. This might be very bad that I don't know basics of things, but so according to Wikipedia, David Wood has two bachelor degrees. And
he has a doctorate.
Yeah, he's got doctorate. So why he's calling him uneducated?
Now go and look at my Wikipedia page.
I know you got doctorate and you got PhD.
It's right there on the Wikipedia page. So why does he say that we're uneducated? Now look at Dan Brubaker's Wikipedia page.
Yeah, I know his education.
We all have doctorates. So how can he say we're uneducated? And also we have doctorates in this very area. At least I do. So, to say that we are uneducated, no, we understand the historical critical method much better than he does, because he refused. Remember, he said he was going to do, when he saw what he was hearing, or when he heard what his professors were saying at Yale University, he wanted to stop his doctorate on Ibn Taymiyyah and do a doctorate on this. I wish he had, because he would be the first one that I'm aware of in the Muslim world who's actually done a PhD and applied the historical critical method to the Hadith sciences, to whether Muhammad said what he did or whether Muhammad did what he did. Because the only way you can know whether Muhammad existed is to go back to these Hadith sciences. The only way we can understand who this man was and what he said are the Hadith scientists. And when he says Hadith, he means Sirah, Hadith, Tafsir, and Tahrir. He's really talking about the standard Islamic narrative. He's putting them all into the same category. So that's why it's fascinating that he's attacking us missionaries now as being uneducated, when in fact we have taken our academic credentials and we've applied the historical critical method to him, and not to him personally, but to his work and of course to his traditions. All right, we need to go on.
Did you know that David Wood's PhD on surprise by suffering, human drama and biasing argument from evil? That's like amazing. Wow. And his PhD, he's finished that in like 2013. Wow.
Yeah, so he has.
Anyway, yeah,
there are academics, whether Yasir Qadhi wants to admit it or not.
It or not. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't know that. So his PhD is interesting topic. Anyway, okay. So continue with the video. He's got like 6 more minutes.
Let's continue. Yeah.
Okay.
So his definition of loser is because we confront his traditions. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. Poor Muslims can't defend Islam.
Be mentioned by name. That's why I don't mention them by name by and large. They're not even actual academics. Actual academics that are studying, generally speaking, you find their discourse to be more nuanced and more precise. As for these people online, let them be. What do you expect them to do? They're not going to harm the deen. And I think we give them more attention than they deserve. But in any case, bottom line, it's not my goal to, astaghfirullah, create drama or to give Islamophobes ammunition, much less between my fellow Muslims in the da'wah field. My goal really is to defend the religion, the Quran, the Sunnah, the Seerah. But my philosophy of defending is different than many of those involved on the da'wah field. I believe to defend, you need to build more robust and more nuanced arguments. This is the point. And with utmost respect, I don't agree with much of the simplistic rhetoric. That simplistic rhetoric resonates with lots of people. I get it. But it's simply not factually correct, even if it resonates with lots of people. So when I disagree, it's not because, astaghfirullah, I'm doubting the Quran or Hadith. It's because to prove it, we're going to have to change and be more precise in what exactly are we defending. And acknowledge, like in the Hadith here, that and look, there's a lot to acknowledge, subhanAllah. Let them say whatever they want about that faith-based. In the end of the day, we can come back and say, factually speaking, there is no system that any civilization has developed that comes even close to isnad verification. That is a fact. We have elaborate biographies of over 10,000 narrators spanning 5 generations. Literally the entire geography of the ummah. We have a sophisticated mechanism that, okay, I admit there's an element of faith. Let's just admit that. Let's be fair here. But then once you've admitted that, once you have acknowledged and conceded there is an element that we're going to trust Imam Malik, but then say, but look at your equivalents. You guys have no names whatsoever, no asanid, no biographies. You guys have the people that wrote your New Testament, you don't even know anything about them, much less who narrated from them. You have no idea who Luke and Mark and Matthew are. You have no idea of their biographies. So, what my opinion, if we can speak factually, we're able to defend it.
Let me just pause here.
Okay, let me just repeat. I've got quote. That quote is amazing. There is no system that any civilization has developed that comes even close to isnad verification. We have an elaborate biography of over 10,000 narrators spanning 5 generations. That is his whole epistemology right there. That it doesn't matter his isnad verification, there is absolutely no verification because nothing was written down to verify it. So he's missing the whole point of what the historical standard narrative is. The historical standard narrative says you've got to have something written down to know whether that person said that. We live that our whole lives that way. When you buy an object, you get a receipt that's written down what you have paid, when the date was, and what was the item for. And if you ever have a problem with that item, you take it back to the store. You better have a written document to prove that you bought that item at that date in that store. Otherwise, they're not going to take it back or replace it. We do our whole lives dependent on written documentation of what we did or what we say. That's why we're doing this video. Today now we don't need written documents. We need videos so that we're actually letting him speak. We could have written this out if we wanted to, but that would have been doubted. So we have now new technology that makes sure that we know what Yasir Qadhi said on July the 31st, 2025, so that we can confront it or we can understand it or know exactly now how his hadith sciences are to be proven. And what we're finding is he is saying just the opposite. We don't need any verification. He says it's the best verification. The best verification would have a written script, a written text, something that was written by these men with their signed autograph on it would be very helpful. Because listen, we're talking about not the 1st century when everything was written on papyrus. We're talking about now the 7th century and the 8th century. And in this case, we're moving up into Sahih Bukhari, the 9th century. When there was no papyrus needed, they all have parchment. They all had animal skins. They were all there in the caliphal court, so therefore they had all the riches at their disposal, and yet they didn't write anything down. And that's why the historical critical method completely shuts down their verification method. Yet on this side, he's now admitted, not once, not twice, he now said 5 times, we must have faith that it was accurate. That is, as he says, the system that no other developed, that nothing other has developed that comes close to that. That's his system that nothing else comes close to. That we assume that they were correct, that we assume that they were pious, that they were trustworthy. Can you see why it is almost laughable of what he's demanding us to accept? We can't accept that because we don't know whether they are accurate. We have no idea whether they were pious or not. No one was there to know that. We're not even sure whether they even existed. All we can know is what is written down so that we can apply the source, critical, and also form and textual criticism to it. We demand that because that same thing has been done of our text. Because
and he was okay with that. Remember, he was okay with that. He was agreeing with that.
Because of the fact that they demanded that of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Paul, and the others. And he says, therefore, that is proven that they all wrote it and it did not come from God. So his paradigm was, it has to come from God. Therefore, he agrees with it. He didn't want to take that same category and apply it to his text because he knows that there is no way you can apply it. There is nothing written down. And that's why they have to come up with this idea. We just know that these men were great. And as long as they were great, we can trust them.
So if you think very practically, okay, Bukhari 4953, that's the hadith is talking about Waraka is translating the gospel. So sake of the argument, sake of the Islamic tradition, let's say it's correct. Waraka is translating the gospel according to Sahih Bukhari. They thought that was important to translate it. So he's writing down some stuff, okay? Yet they didn't think it was important to write down what Abu Huraira said, what Mohammed said in 7th century, in 8th century. I find that strange. Like, you've got all technology. Not only you've got all technology and equipment, but you also have control system, yet you still didn't put things down. As the time went on, like, you put people in prison for writing things down. It's just like, you come up with all these names. How can that be? Like, you just created something to justify what law or what actions you want people to follow, and then you came up with the names, and then you think that's miracle. I see that.
Okay, it gets even better than that, Hatun. You know very good well that in 632 to 634 there was a man named Zaid ibn Thabit who was what was his position under Abu Bakr and Uthman and Ali? What was his?
He was given the job of compiling the Quran.
And why was he given that job?
Because there was no Quran compiled. People
no, but why was he specifically given that job?
People were dying in the battle of Yamama.
No. I'm going to keep coming back to this. He was the scribe. He was the secretary of Muhammad. That was his job. He was the secretary of Muhammad. Azraqi refers to 65 secretaries that Muhammad had. We have the names of all of them, all 65 of his secretaries.
Yeah, so
what did the secretaries do?
So the concern is, why didn't they think it was important to write it down?
Well, what in the world were those secretaries doing? Those 65 secretaries, what were they doing at the time of Muhammad? What were they doing? If Muhammad had that many secretaries, how many did Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali? How many did all of those continuing in the caliphal courts all the way up until Malik in the late 8th century? Didn't they have hundreds of secretaries? If Muhammad had 65 that we have names for, by the 8th century, we're talking about another 150 years later, 160 years later, they would have had probably hundreds of secretaries. Why did not one of them write it down? Not one. There's the problem. And this is a perfectly good and legitimate question to ask. If Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote down what they saw and heard, and remember, Matthew and Luke were the only ones that were educated to be at that time. The other two were not. How is it that they still wrote it down? And this idea that it all had to be memorized and trustworthy, the idea that anybody could have this kind of memory, to me, is incredulous, because even today we write things down because of memory loss. We write things down because the memory can't be trusted. And we're talking about not just 15 minutes later, we're talking about hundreds of years later, the memory was perfect, passed on from generation to generation. Every one of them had perfect memory. Can you then understand why the historical critical method now discredits, and why he said this on July 6th? July 9th. It does discredit what he's trying to really defend. And it's difficult for him to defend it unless you take his paradigm. And his paradigm is, we just have faith that Allah somehow made these men pure and made them trustworthy and made them accurate and made them able to send it on 100% pass it on to the next 100% accurately. So this is, to me, what a paradigm, and we're finally getting it. And why isn't we haven't heard this before in public? And is it fascinating? It's taken till 2025 for us to finally get it out so people could see, why in the world are we even questioning what Muhammad said and did? It's because this is all we have to go on, what he is saying today. Now let's continue on, because he's not yet finished. He's going to continue to attack the New Testament, and saying and here's the interesting, the thing that he's attacking about the New Testament are the biographies of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. As if we needed to have hundreds, 10,000 biographies written about these four guys. It's not important that we have their biographies, because it's not them that is important. We are not saying that they're pious. We're not saying that they're trustworthy. We're not even saying that they understood 100%, or that they passed it on, because they wrote it down almost immediately, and that's why we don't need these other criteria. Can you see? Completely two epistemologies, but thank God for our Bible, and thank you God for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and thank God for Paul, because he was academic. He knew exactly what he was writing, and he did write those letters down. And that's why we can trust it, because they were written down for posterity. They were written down, and I would suggest, like him, that what's the word I'm saying? So the Holy Spirit was covering that what he wrote. But we do know who wrote it. We do know when they wrote it, and we know why they wrote it. So we don't have this problem over here like he's having it. And we don't have to depend on this giant leap of faith to even hope, and it really is a hope, that Malik got it. Well, what about Umar? And what about Nasr before him? Or Umar, Nasr, and then Malik? And then what about the other 6th generation that come before it's finally written down by Muhammad or Sahih Muslim? And show me where Sahih Muslim's documents are. Because those documents don't even appear in their final form until the 14th and 15th century. That's years after the fact.
Yeah. Let me just comment on what Phil is asking. If memory is such a reliable thing, why write it down? Phil has the skill of asking questions and writing his questions down because he knows people are forgetting things. And we know, according to Islamic tradition in 7th century, the reason they compiled the Quran because memory failed. Memory failed.
Especially at the Battle of Yamama. The Battle of Yamama,
Even-
many of those that memorized it died.
Even within 20 years after that, when they are in fighting with Azerbaijan, they've got the memory, but their memory is different from one another. They are calling one another kafir. So memory was not working in 7th century. And tradition tells us, I think Hadith comes from Abu Huraira, Mohammed had a bad memory as well. One of the things I just wanted to say, as you were talking about, like background of the authors of the biblical text, I find it's amazing when you turn up the court hearings to testify about something. Question is not, okay, before you testify, show me your qualifications from which university you went to. But question is, what did you see? Who are the other witnesses? So it's very different mind setting, comparing that with Muslims. Okay, shall I continue?
Far more robust manner. And without a doubt, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is an integral part of Islam, and Allah has promised to protect his religion. And I mean, again, I find it embarrassing, to be honest. I literally have to say this, like, guys, my entire 32 years of da'wah, try to find a khutbah or lecture, I haven't quoted a hadith. Try to find a fatwa, I haven't quoted a hadith. The entirety of the seerah is what? Quoting narrations. Of course, for us, that's what we believe in. And yes, we don't need the Western paradigm. But as somebody who navigates both of them, when I'm in that circle, I'll be speaking in a manner that is conducive. One of the main points that a lot of people said I should have been more, critical or whatnot. I get it, but it's like, I've taught, when I used to teach in the university, I used to teach classes on religion. That's a part of what professors do. It's not just Islamic studies, you teach religion. And I remember one day that I said a phrase and I'm like, wow, that phrase, if anybody heard it, I'd be in a lot of trouble. I'm going to repeat it online. Let's see if trouble happens. Literally. You know what I said I was teaching an intro to religion class, right? I said, so Christians believe that Jesus is Son of God, and Muslims believe that he is a prophet of God. And then I went on. That's all. And I said to myself, if that simple phrase, which is factually correct, if somebody who has never been in a secular environment, many of the people where I had studied from, never met a Christian in their lives, never interacted with them, if they had heard that phrase and the nonchalant manner that I just said a factually correct statement, Christians believe Jesus is Son of God, Muslims believe he is a prophet. And then I moved on to another point. If I had said that, it is so easy for somebody who has never heard a simplistic statement like that to literally accuse me of blasphemy. A'udhu billah, Allah says the mountains are going to break asunder. Allah says the earth is going to be shattered. Because literally the Quran says that. They ascribe to Allah that he has a son. The mountains are going to break and the sky is going to split. And that's absolutely valid. And I believe it is blasphemous to say that. But when I'm teaching an intro to religion class, I'm not giving a khutbah. And I'm sorry, brothers and sisters, but I'm going to have to say this. I want my students to raise the bar of learning. I don't want to teach you these simplistic baby food formulas. You need to understand when you're teaching in an academic setting, you're going to say these types of things because that's what is required. And I expect you to do that as well. And we want Muslims in the academy. We want Muslims everywhere else. And that's a part of the new discourse that's going to happen. Just like when the far right takes a khutbah of mine and puts it in theirs, I want you to understand when people are giving political speeches, when people are speaking in churches and synagogues, when people are giving academic lectures, they're not going to use the language of the khutbah. I don't need to apologize for this, frankly. I need to ask you to understand that I'm not the only person. Other people are involved in multiple areas as well. So you need to start thinking about this reality and start being involved and realize that there are different categories of people that are being taught different things at different levels. As long as what is being said is factually correct, I do have a rule that I put up on myself, and that is I will never lie about the religion. Never. I'm speaking the truth. So understand this point here. Bottom line, Without a doubt, my track record, I mean, as a Muslim, as a believer, there is no religion without the Sunnah. That's the reality of our faith. And the Sunnah has been preserved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the mechanisms of its preservation are valid and binding for believers. That's quite simple and non-negotiable. We understand why and wish to take pride in it. Those who don't believe in Allah, those who don't believe in the Quran, those who don't believe in the Messenger, obviously, we understand they will not agree to our epistemology in spite of how rigorous it is, because there are aspects that are faith-based. So I hope that inshallah ta'ala, that is understood and answered.
Okay. So that was the end. That was the end of it.
So he ends with this quote: "There is no Islam without the Sunnah." Now, the Sunnah would be what the Muhammad said and what Muhammad did. So the Sunnah is the example of Muhammad. That includes the Sirah, that's the biography of Ibn Hisham al-Waqidi. That would include the Hadith of Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi, Majah, and Nasa'i. And that would also include the Tafsir of Al-Tabari and also the Tahqiq. So all four genres is what would be in the Sunnah. So he says, there is no Islam without the Sunnah, and it has been preserved by Allah. Others will not agree to our epistemology. And when he's in one group, he says, does not talk about it, or he talks about it. When he's in the other group, he does not talk about it. When he's with academia in the Western world, when he's in the universities, he doesn't bring up Sahih Bukhari or Sahih Muslim or Isham. When he's over here, he doesn't go with a step. He says he doesn't even go anytime without preaching a khutbah. That means to preach without mentioning it. So two different epistemologies, two different worlds, and the two will never, ever agree. And that's why he's saying we don't have to apply this paradigm onto us, because this paradigm is not neutral. This paradigm over here, the standard decline of the historical critical method, has a bias built into it. It is not neutral. But over here, we are neutral, is what he is saying. Can you see the implications? And our whole paradigm, the standard Islamic narrative, is dependent really on a leap of faith. We assume that where we get our material from came from men who are pious, who are trustworthy, who were completely accurate in the way they memorized and accurate in what they passed on. Those four criteria. And since we can trust them, we know that we don't have to apply this to them, but they will never accept that, because for them, they want to see historical documentation for everything someone said or someone did. Now, can you see, Hatun, we are over here. We have to live in this world. In some ways, we know that as Christians, we also do believe that there in miracles. We believe that God does enter time and space, and we know that God can do miracles. And so we start with a somewhat similar epistemology, but that's not what we're demanding over on this side. When we ask the historical question is, did the person who saw those miracles or the person who heard what Jesus said, did they write it down accurately? Were they there? Were they eyewitnesses? And when they wrote it down within their lifetime, I'm not saying within 15 minutes or 20 minutes, so there is a time gap of a few years. With John, it's probably 60 years before it was written down for what he saw and what he heard. But within that time gap, did they get it correct? And what we're saying is we apply source criticism and form criticism onto everything and see, are there inconsistencies with their testimony? What they wrote down, are there inconsistencies? Are there contradictions? And this is a great study by comparing what Jesus said and did. So our sirah, because we have the same sirah of Jesus, which is what Jesus did, and our hadith, which is what Jesus said in the Bible, it's written in red letters, and our tafsir, which would be the commentaries of Paul, what he wrote to Philippi and Corinth and to Ephesus and also to Rome, that's our tafsir, because the tafsir is taking what the Quran says and applying it and understanding it. Paul did that with Jesus' teaching and applied it to different cities. And our tahriq, that would be the equivalent, would be the book of Acts, because there is the history of the early church. So we have the same genre. So therefore, we understand what he is saying. But we would never, ever say that therefore we just trust on faith that those who wrote the tafsir and the tahriq and the sirah and the hadith of Jesus were somehow pure, or they were somehow absolutely trustworthy, or that somehow they passed it on. They were not, we thank God they weren't dependent on passing it on orally from generation after generation after generation after generation for 200 to 400 years. They wrote it down within their own generation, and they wrote it down within the area where Jesus lived. So they were there with Jesus. They saw what he did. They heard what he said, and they wrote what they saw and heard. And it was superimposed by the Holy Spirit, and that's where our leap of faith comes, that the secular world doesn't understand. We do know that God made sure that what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote, and what Paul wrote, and Peter and the others, that what they wrote was accurate. So we do take that part. But the rest of it, we have to live in the world of academia. We have to live in the secular world. And we have to prove that when we read these accounts of Jesus' life and what he said and did, that they are accurate. And we've had to do that for 200 years. And thank God that we have people like Dan Wallace, and thank God we have people like Wes Huff and all these amazing scholars today. Michael Jones, who's amazing what he's doing, how they're defending the accuracy of the account, of the written account. We have so many scholars today that spend their whole careers making sure that what Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Paul, and Peter, and others wrote, that we can trust 99.9% of it. And we're only talking about 40 verses that are in doubt out of, 6,230? How many verses do we have in the New Testament? I think it's around 6,000.
I don't know.
Just 40 verses are in doubt. And we actually tell people right when those 40 verses are that these are not in the earliest manuscripts. We're very transparent about it. So we don't have this methodology. We don't need this methodology. And at the very end, when he said, how is it I can trust the Christian Sirah and the Tafsir and the Hadith? Because there's no biographies written about these men. That was his only criteria, that we don't have biographies. Whereas on his side, they have 10,000 biographies on these guys, as if that's the criteria that the world's looking for. Remember, where were those biographies written and when were they written? Look at the dates. They don't appear until the 11th century. 11th before these biographies of these guys who lived in the 7th century. That's 400 years later that they finally get written down. And so even that he doesn't want to talk about. He won't even go into the extant manuscript problem of everything that he is dependent on.
Okay.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Let me just summarize here. So you are echoing what Yasir Qadhi is saying, that no Islam without Sunnah. Yet it's the same Yasir Qadhi is pointing out to us that actually Sunnah is being discredited, cannot stand up the historical critical method. We just need to live in our own bubble without criticizing it.
It's a bubble. And that bubble is it's becoming more and more isolated from the rest of the world. That bubble in Epic, where he's doing his teaching, if it continues to go this way, Yasir Qadhi is going to be more and more isolated academically. And the more he puts out these type of videos, and this is why he is being honest. He is, Hatun. He is trying to be as honest as he can, because he knows he has to make sense for both camps. And he knows, having been in this camp for so many years, doing his doctorate here, that those in this camp can't just immediately dismiss the epistemology that's coming out of Western academia. He has to speak to Western academia. So that's why he's trying his best. And have you noticed, the only answer he has for Western academia is Iman. Iman, one word. It comes down to one word: faith. It is all to do with faith. And he said that in this video. That's why I'm so glad we've unpacked it. It all comes down to faith, that what they're reading was created or observed by men who were pious. Faith that these pious men were trustworthy. Faith that these men got 100% accurate vision, what they wrote, what they said, Muhammad said, and what they saw, what Muhammad did, that they were 100% accurate, and faith that what they then passed on was absolutely correct, 100% correct, from not just what they got to the Tabi'un, but then what came to the third generation, the fourth generation, the fifth generation, and to the sixth generation, when it was finally written down by Hisham, Waqidi, Bukhari, Muslim, and all the others, what he doesn't know yet, that we don't even have their manuscripts. We have nothing from that time. Okay.
Well, we don't know if he knows that or not, but probably it is in his, he probably studied. He's not publicly talking about it, but he expressed that he's got robust arguments. So that means we keep eye on him to see what he's bringing up. So just wanted to point out something. So since we are talking about all scripture stuff, 2 Timothy chapter 3 states, Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. All Scripture is God's breath and useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be truly equipped for every good work. So, Scripture is the very breath of God, very word of God for our salvation. So, Genesis to Revelation, all of it. It's good to be reminded that. Wanted to bring up your question, Jay. Came a little bit earlier, but I forgot to kind of bring it up on the screen. We were talking about Sahabas. So question is, do we have any contemporary mention in history to any of those Sahabas?
Not one word. Listen, we can't even find any references to Muhammad in the 7th century from down in Mecca. We can't find any reference to Uthman, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. The first time we see references to anybody that Muslims claim is Muslim is Muawiyah. Muawiyah, and that's, we're talking about 651.
Okay, so...
Sorry, 661, not 651, 661. So that's 30 years after Muhammad. And interestingly, all those documents about Muawiyah are way up in Damascus. Why is he not down in Mecca, Medina, where all the others were? Okay. So there's no Sahaba. We don't have any reference to the Sahaba. Since we have no reference to the Sahaba, that's the dilemma that Dr. Shabir Ali and Dr. Yasir Qadhi are dealing with. They know that. They know that there is no records for the Sahaba or the Tabi'un, the second generation. And that's why they're struggling now to try to help the rest of the world, those of us, to see that why they still stand by them. And of course, as you saw, it's taken us 2 hours to get through this, but as you saw, it's basically just comes down to faith.
Yeah.
One word, Iman.
Yeah, no Islam without Sunnah, but Sunnah is being discredited from the historical perspective. It might be helpful to check out Jonathan Brown's work. He's a Muslim scholar writing on Hadith and its collections, and then also, I forgot the name of the gentleman, Bernie Power. He's got some. Yeah, he's got some writing on Hadith as well. They won't provide very basic information you are asking regarding like, oh, what did they do, all those kind of things, but you will get the dates and the names and probably how many Hadiths they've been mentioned, those kind of things. And then also there was a gentleman called, I can't remember his surname, Mustafa something. His book is like blue cover with the mosque on it. He died a couple of years ago. In his book, he talks about, mentions some of the Sahabas and their links with Mohammed, or with how they mentioned within Islamic tradition. I might remember the name, and then if you drop me email, I can kind of put that in the email as well.
Yeah, the other one is Tadal Asad that he refers to in this recording. Now, I have a student who's doing his master's degree who is working on all of this, and he's going back through all the traditions from within the traditions, and he's trying to find out exactly where they're going and how is it they're able to support it. And he's going through, he is going through Tadal Asad's material. So we'll have all of that for you. Give us time. We'll go up and we'll probably come on. I'll probably come with Hatun again, and we'll show you exactly what the modern scholars are saying and what the Muslim scholars are saying to defend it.
Just also helpful to remember, approximate 95% of those Sahabas, we've got nothing on them.
We don't. I mean, 100%. Can you give me one of the 120,000?
No, I'm just looking from the Islamic perspective, Jay. Like for example, we've got 5,000 hadith from Abu Huraira, all those kind of things. But there are other names. People are talking about 120,000 or a couple of thousands. We don't have much of those things. I'm just like looking from general Islamic traditional perspective. Okay, I think we can stop here. really appreciate that. First of all, you brought the video to my attention, and then we went through. Sorry, we did have some technical issues, like middle of the live stream kind of video got bigger, and then I couldn't make that smaller stuff. But well, hopefully I will.
Hatun, you did a great job. I think we all followed you fine. Don't worry.
Thank you. And thank you very much, everyone who joined us in the chat as well. Thank you, Jay, for joining me. You said you are traveling. Beside praying for your safety, joining your travels, anything else? Any prayer you need? Anything else?
No, I think of all these attacks that I'm getting in the last week and a half, we are going to respond to every one of them. But it won't just be me. It will be a whole committee of us that are going to take every one of these and respond to any of them. Watch that date. It'll be coming up.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us again, once again. God bless you. We will see you tomorrow. I'm seeing you tomorrow on another live stream with Adam Sika, by God's grace. And then we've got live stream with Callum, Titan TVs, and Jay Smith on Friday to follow up the Mohammed Callum find. So we will go through that as well. By God's grace, we will see you again. Thank you very much, everyone who joined us.
Bye-bye.